Imagine waking up one morning to see your name in the news, accused of a crime you never committed. Now, picture this. Your own clothes found in the trunk of a suspect's car. How did they get there? Who put them there? And why does every clue point back to you, even when you know you're innocent? This story will take you through dark secrets, family betrayals, and a mystery that keeps twisting until the very last moment. And trust me, you won't be able to stop listening once it begins. So if you want to uncover the shocking truth behind this story, or you love suspenseful tales like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and drop your thoughts in the comments, because the next twist might be even darker than you expect. My clothes were found in the suspect's car. That was a headline that burned across every screen in the city. But before the world even knew my name, I was just a young Thai-American woman trying to build a quiet life in Portland, Oregon. I remember the first night it started. The rain soaking the streets, the neon reflection of a small Thai restaurant glowing against the wet pavement. Inside, my mother stirred a steaming pot of tom yum, her bracelets clinking as if each sound carried a warning I didn't yet understand. I had left my jacket on the back of a chair, a simple denim jacket with a patch of a white elephant, a gift from my father before he passed. By morning, that same jacket was photographed inside the trunk of a man arrested for kidnapping. My hands shook when the detectives asked if it was mine. The city lights blurred as I tried to explain I had never even seen that man before. How could something so personal, something stitched with my father's memory, become evidence against me? The officer's eyes didn't soften when I told him the truth, and the silence that followed carried more weight than words. Friends whispered behind my back, their voices tangled with doubt and fear, the kind that eats through trust like acid. My mother burned incense in the kitchen every night, chanting prayers in Thai, begging the spirits to keep our family safe, the smoke curling like unanswered questions in the dark. But no prayer could explain why the jacket was there. No ritual could erase the photographs printed in the papers. I walked past strangers who stared too long, their faces tight, their eyes narrowing as if the headline was tattooed on my skin. Why was it my clothes, not anyone else's? Why was I tied to a man I never met? And why did I feel like someone was watching me even when I was alone, the sound of footsteps in the rain echoing too close behind? I turned corners quickly, hoping to lose the shadows that clung to me, but the rhythm of those steps always returned, steady, deliberate, as if the city itself wanted me trapped. One night, outside the grocery store, I saw a man leaning against a car, his gaze fixed on me as if he already knew my name, his posture calm, too calm, like a predator waiting for the right moment. The car was old gray, with a dent on the passenger side, the same car I had seen blurred in the news photo of the suspect arrest. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second I thought I was imagining it, until the glint of a keychain swung for his hand, a carved wooden amulet shaped like a Garuda bird, something that belonged to my grandmother's shrine, not in his palm. My knees went weak, because I knew then he wasn't just a stranger. He had been in my home, or at least close enough to touch what should never leave our family walls. The store's fluorescent lights flickered above me as I backed away, groceries slipping from my arms, oranges rolling across the wet asphalt like small suns scattering into the dark. The man didn't move, didn't smile, didn't even blink. He just let the keychain swing back and forth, like a silent metronome marking the beat of my fear. When I finally turned and ran, I didn't dare look back. The whole way home, my chest tight, I could still hear the faint clink of that amulet hitting his keys, like an echo that followed me through the night. And when I reached my door, fumbling for the lock, I saw something hanging from the handle that froze the blood in my veins. My denim jacket, folded neatly, smelling faintly of smoke and rain. I couldn't breathe as my fingers brushed the fabric, every stitch whispering a story I didn't want to hear. The elephant patch my father had sewn himself was torn, hanging by a single thread, as if someone wanted to know they had touched it, altered it, claimed it. Inside the pocket was a folded slip of paper, damp from the rain, the ink smudged but still legible. 3 words, written in shaky block letters. You were there. The hallway light above me buzzed and flickered, casting shadows that stretched like claws along the walls, and in that moment the silence felt alive, pressing against my skin. I staggered inside, locking every bolt, my mother rising from the kitchen with a bowl of steaming rice, her smile fading the second she saw my face and the jacket clutched in my hands. She didn't ask where it came from. She just whispered something in Thai under her breath, a phrase I hadn't heard since childhood, something about spirits that cling to objects when blood has been spilled. I wanted to scream that this wasn't superstition. This was real. Someone was framing me. Someone wanted me destroyed. But the word stuck in my throat when I noticed the incense still burning on the counter, the smoke curling not upward but sideways, drifting toward the window. A shadow moved outside, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was out there wanted me to know they hadn't left. And then, softly, almost tenderly, a knock came at the door. ChatGPT said. The knock was soft, polite, as if the person on the other side wanted pretend civility still existed in a world that had already betrayed me. My mother's fingers tightened around the spoon, the sound small but fierce, like a talisman against the dark. I moved to the door with the slow, careful steps of someone who expects the floor to drop out from beneath them at any second. Through the peephole, a street lamp haloed the figure outside, rain beating on his shoulders like tiny, accusing stars. His hat was soaked, the brim low, hiding most of his face, but when he tipped his chin, the Garuda amulet flashed against his throat, the same carved bird I'd seen at the grocery store, the same one in the news photo clipped to the suspect's car. My mouth went dry, my heart hammered against my ribs like a drum at a funeral. He spoke in English with no accent I could place, his voice even too controlled, as if he had practiced the right inflection for confession and for lies. "May I come in?" he said, and the question was not a request, but a roadmap to the trap I could feel, but could not name. My mother's eyes met mine and something ancient passed between us. Fear braided with defiance, a knowledge older than the city's glass towers. She moved without a word, slipping a shawl over her shoulders, her hands steady though her knuckles were white, and opened the door an inch. The man's face was only partly visible now, a shadowed sculpture of cheekbones and tired lines, and when he smiled it was a small, sorrowful thing that did not reach his eyes. "Your jacket," he said, and he held up my denim like an offering or a weapon, the torn elephant patch drooping like a wounded flag. He stepped inside before I could stop him, his presence folding into the small apartment like smoke into paper, leaving a smell of engine oil and incense in his wake. He set the jacket down on the table with such care it looked rehearsed, as if he had repeated this exact gesture in many rooms across many cities. "I found it in my car," he said, and the way he said those words made them both truth and accusation, like a coin struck on both sides. The man's face was only partly visible now, a shadowed sculpture of cheekbones and tired lines, and when he smiled it was a small, sorrowful thing that did not reach his eyes. "Your jacket," he said, and he held up my denim like an offering or a weapon, the torn elephant patch drooping like a wounded flag. He stepped inside before I could stop him, his presence folding into the small apartment like smoke into paper, leaving a smell of engine oil and incense in his wake. He set the jacket down on the table with such care it looked rehearsed, as if he had repeated this exact gesture in many rooms across many cities. "I found it in my car," he said, and the way he said those words made them both truth and accusation, like a coin struck on both sides. "What do you want?" I asked, the question barely more than a whisper, because loud questions call attention, and attention had a price I couldn't pay. He crouched to the level of my eyes, and for a moment I thought I would see guilt there or relief, or some human faltering. Something to anchor me. Instead, he produced a photo, sliding it across the table like a car dealer laying down a hand. A smear of rain and shadow reduced the paper. Me, but not me. My silhouette leaving the place of the temple, my hair tied with a ribbon my mother used to wear, a figure captured leaving a shrine on a night when my alibi was a cracked TV and a takeaway box in the Thai place 2 blocks over. The photograph was old, edges damp, and someone had written the date on the back in the same shaky hand as the note in my pocket. A date that placed me somewhere I had no memory of being. I reached for it, and my fingers shook so badly the corner fluttered, like a wounded bird. My mother's voice came then, low and raw in Thai, a string of words that tasted like grief and accusation, asking the spirits to reveal what the living would not speak aloud. The man's eyes softened for the briefest second, and in that crack of humanity I glimpsed something that wasn't entirely monstrous, just bruised, complicated, human enough to be dangerous. "I'm not the one who planted it," he said, and the clause hung there like an unpaid debt, neither a denial nor an absolution, and every syllable felt like a lever clicking into place somewhere under the city. Outside, a siren wailed once and then faded, the sound a distant animal mourning the night's small cruelties. Then who? I wanted to ask, but the question was the same trap as before. Too many possibilities and none of them kind. He bent forward and touched the Garuda amulet at his throat, closing his fingers around its carved wings, as if to steady himself against the weight of memory. My car's been broken into before, he said, but this time someone put more than clothes in it. He looked up at me, and for the first time his face was lit clearly by the kitchen light. A long scar slashed across his jaw, a faded tattoo of a lotus partially hidden under his collar, and a small, familiar smudge of turmeric powder along his thumb, the same yellow stain my grandmother's hands always had after cooking curry. "You were there," he said slowly, echoing the paper's accusation, but then he added softer, "Not where they say." The air in the room shifted like the pull before a tide, expectant and terrible, and I realized I had been clinging to a single loop, my jacket, my name and headlines, while a larger web tightened just beyond my sight. My fingers closed around the photograph, and the paper bit into my skin. The date on the back matched the night my father's shrine at the temple had been cleared for renovations, the night I had been helping my mother sell old offerings, the night I thought I had been safe in the glow of paper lanterns. "You know this place," the man said, voice threaded with something like pity, and when he said the room filled with a distant metallic sound of car door slamming 3 floors below, a punctuation that could have been coincidence or orchestration. My mother crossed herself, murmuring for protection, her lips moving in ties so fast I could not make the sounds into meaning, and the amulet between the man's fingers gleamed under the light, promising either salvation or ruin. He slid another photograph across the table, this one showing the suspect's car open at the trunk, our jacket among other items, an altar of personal things. Yet in the corner, barely visible, was a figure I did not recognize, a silhouette with particular gait, someone who carried themselves like they were always on the verge of leaving. The knock at the door earlier had been the opening chord of a song, whose chorus I still could not hear, and now every new image, every new word folded the melody tighter until it felt like a noose humming with memory. "Who is he?" I asked finally, and my voice trembled not from fear, but because I was starting to understand that the question belonged to a larger story, one that threaded through temples and courtrooms, through old family debts and new digital feeds. The man's jaw hardened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, faded bus ticket, its ink blurred but the route still legible. The number of a line that ran from the Thai temple on Southeast Hawthorne to the industrial park, where the suspect's car had been impounded. He laid it down beside the photograph and said, "You were on this bus." The room tightened around the 3 objects on the table, like actors gathering around a single prop, and the silence that followed was the kind that makes you hear things you'd rather not. My father's old lullaby humming the back of my mind, the distant click of a camera shutter, the soft thud of rain against the window pane. I wanted to refuse the ticket, to throw it into the sink, to demand cameras and receipts, and an alibi that would stand up in a court of men who had already decided where I belonged. Instead, I touched the edge of the bus stub, and the paper left a smear of ink on my finger, wet and real, and the scrape of that small truth felt like a starting pistol in a race I did not know I had entered. Outside, the streetlight blinked once and went dark, plunging the hallway into a charcoal hush, and the man's phone vibrated on the table, a single, insistent buzz that pierced the apartment like a distant bell. He glanced at it, hesitation in the way he moved, as if whatever message awaited him could change the course of the night. Finally, he picked it up, thumbed the screen, and his face went unreadable in the glow. "I have to go," he said, standing as if he could leave the room and the questions and the jacket behind him like a coat on a hook, neat, easy, disposable. My mother's hand shook as she reached out and brushed the denim, and for a moment I thought she might crush the fabric with her fingers to make sure it was real. The man paused at the door, his hand on the knob, and then he turned back, the light catching the edge of his cheek, where the scar ran like a folded map. "There's a video," he said, and his voice was suddenly brittle with urgency. "It shows someone who shouldn't be there, someone who knows the layout of your mother's kitchen." He let the words hang so that they trembled, and then he opened the door and stepped out into the rain as if the night had been waiting for his exit. We heard his footsteps fade down the stairs, the sound measured, like a man counting breaths. And for a sliver of a second, I felt a ridiculous, aching hope that he had left us a jacket and the truth both. Then my phone buzzed, light cutting the shadow between the table and the window, and a notification crawled across the screen. The local news pushing update. New footage recovered from the suspect's car. Experts confirm possession of items traced to multiple people. More arrests expected. The loop tightened again, a visible thread pulling us toward the unknown. And I realized with cold clarity that my life had become an image on a screen, subject to edits I could not control. My mother sank into a chair, trembling, and I stood over the table looking at the jacket, the photographs, the bus ticket, tiny relics of a night that refused to stay buried. Down the hall, a neighbor slammed a door, and the sound snapped our apartment like a hell breath being released, sudden and sharp. I dialed the only number I knew by heart, the one for the temple. The night keeper would hand out jasmine garlands and advice in equal measure, but my thumb hovered, because calling the temple meant calling on ghosts and obligations that I had, until now, kept neatly folded away. A soft scrape at the window made me look up, a shadow moving along the alley, quick and purposeful, and for a heartbeat I thought it might be the man returning, or a detective, or the person in the photograph with the familiar gait. The alley light blinked again, and in that brief flash I saw a flash of fabric. Something patterned, unmistakably tie, a piece of silk printed with small lotuses fluttering like a borrowed flag. Then the figure vanished into the rain as if swallowed whole. My chest tightened around a question that had no easy answers, and I realized a note, "You were there," had not been a single accusation, but a starting gun, aimed not just at me but at everyone tied to that night. I picked up the jacket, feeling the tear of the elephant patch, and in the ragged edge of fabric there was a loose thread that glimmered like a thin promise. I pulled it free, and attached to its end was a hair, dark, with a single streak of silver, curling like a small confession between my fingers. The phone buzzed again with another news alert, louder this time. The man who had left the jacket had sent one last message. Check the shrine footage. Look under the altar. My mother froze. Her spoon Madère, rice forgotten, and the apartment seemed to lean toward that small, explosive command as if the room itself could not resist the pull of what might be revealed. I wanted to run to the temple, to tear open the wooden doors and demand to see every camera and every offering, to prove the world wrong and myself innocent in one frantic sweep. Instead, I found myself moving with a different kind of dread, slower, as if each step could set off something carefully hidden, an old debt, a long-kept secret, a face someone had promised to forget. I lifted the phone and typed a single word into the search bar, shrine footage, and then hit send to the temple's number, my thumbs trembling, because once you invited the past to show itself on screen, there was no turn projector off. A reply came almost immediately, brief and in Thai. We thought it was gone. Come now. The loop tightened into a circle so smooth it felt inevitable, and I realized that everything I had been running from, my father's memory, my mother's prayers, the torn elephant patch, was part of a story someone had been excavating piece by piece. I gave my mother the jacket back and said nothing, because language felt inadequate to the shape of what was coming. And together we stepped into the rain, the city's lights smearing like watercolor tears as we walked toward the temple, where the air always smelled of jasmine and old money and the soft clack of prayer beads. The rain made the sidewalk shine, turning the ordinary into something cinematic, and people passed us with faces turned inward, unaware that two small figures in the night carried the weight of photographs and notes and questions that might topple lives. We reached the temple steps, and the monk who tended the shrine stood waiting, robes damp, palms folded, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. And behind him the carved wooden door to the inner sanctum stood half open, a sliver of darkness within like the throat of secret. He gestured us in without words, and the incense burned hotter than usual, the smoke thick and sweet, wrapping around our shoulders like an embrace or a warning. On the floor beneath the main altar, where offerings were placed and prayers were pinned like paper birds, my mother pointed with a trembling hand and said, "Under there." I knelt, fingers numb, and pulled up the floorboard, heart pounding a tattoo against my ribs, and beneath the warm would lay a shallow box wrapped in an oilcloth pattern with tiny lotuses, old, water-stained, and heavy with a promise I could not name. My fingers hovered over the box lid, and for a moment the entire world narrowed to the space between skin and wood, the thin line where truth might break free or remain forever sealed. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled among torn prayer cloths and a small stack of yellow bills, was a compact video camera. Its lens scratched, a roll of film, and a folded photograph showing two people at the temple on the night in question. One of them with my mother's shawl over their shoulders, the other with a profile I could not yet place. The silhouette stepped into the light, and the glint in their hand revealed itself as a keyring, heavy, with one key larger than the rest, an old brass temple key, the kind only the elders were trusted to hold. The figure moved with the deliberate rhythm of someone unafraid to be seen, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted, as though the temple itself bent around their presence. Their face came into view, sharp under the lantern glow, and my breath snagged in my throat. It was my Uncle Samchai, my father's older brother, the man who had left Portland years ago after a bitter family rift, a man I had only known through fragments of my mother's silence and the occasional letter in Thai script that she never answered. His eyes swept the room and landed on the box at our feet, the jacket on the table, the pause frame on the screen showing the lone lotus shoe, and then on me. "You opened it," he said in English, his voice calm but weighted, like someone reading the last line of a long-kept confession. My mother stiffened, her hand tightening on mine so hard my fingers ached. Her lips parted to form words in Thai, but nothing came out, just a dry rasp of air pulled too fast through grief. He stepped closer, the amulet around his neck catching the flicker of candlelight. Not a Garuda this time, but a small jade Buddha cracked along one side, an old talisman that I recognized from childhood photographs of him standing beside my father at temple festivals. "I told you not to hide it here," he said, this time in Thai, his tone sharper, directed at my mother, as though I wasn't even in the room. The monk at the doorway bowed his head, his silence thick with complicity, and for the first time I understood that this temple, these walls I thought were sacred and safe, had been part of the story from the beginning. Uncle Samchai placed a brass key on the altar, its metallic clink echoing like a gavel, final and irreversible. He looked at me again, and his gaze was not cruel, not kind, but steady, almost searching, as if he wanted me to piece together what he would not yet say aloud. "The shoe," he murmured, pointing to the frozen frame on the monitor. "You know whose it is, don't you?" The question slammed through me like a door kicked open in the dark, and though my lips trembled with denial, my mind betrayed me, conjuring an image I had buried deep. A childhood memory of that same patterned silk, lotus shapes dancing in the sunlight, tied around my cousin Molly's waist as she ran barefoot across my grandmother's courtyard in Bangkok, laughing, a sound bright enough to carve into bone. Molly, my uncle's daughter, who had vanished from our lives without explanation years ago, her name never spoken at family gatherings, her photograph quietly removed from the walls. The shoe on the screen matched hers exactly. My uncle's face softened with something like regret, but his eyes were flint when he spoke again. "They think it's you," he said quietly, "because she made sure it would be." The incense smoke thickened, curling upward like a hand closing into a fist, and the grainy image of the lotus shoe held its place on the screen, a silent witness to a story that had only begun to unravel. The silence in the temple stretched until it hurt. The only sound to faint were the old video player, and the steady drip of rain outside against stone. My mother's lips trembled, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched, but she still refused to meet my uncle's eyes. I stared at the frozen frame of the shoe, every nerve in my body alive with the sick weight of realization. Molly wasn't just gone. She had been here, on that night, walking in shadows I never saw, and now her absence had been rewritten into my guilt. My uncle finally broke the silence, his words careful, as though each carried a cost. "She knew about the jacket. She knew about your father's patch. She knew you'd be the one the police would follow when it showed up in the wrong place." My throat tightened, anger and fear rising like a tide. But what cut deepest was the edge of betrayal. The thought that someone I once called family had turned me into a ghost of her crimes. The monk shifted at the door, unease flickering across his face. But he said nothing, and I realized the silence had been bought long before tonight. "Where is she?" I whispered, the words scraping out of me like broken glass. My uncle's gaze dropped to the camera, still paused on the shoe, then back to me, his jaw flexing with something unsaid. "She doesn't want to be found," he said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. "But she wants you to carry it." That was always her way. The words landed heavy like a verdict, but beneath them I caught the flicker of something else. Hesitation, maybe guilt, maybe fear of a debt unpaid. Then the screen flickered, the grainy image shifting on its own, and for a brief second another frame appeared. Molly's face, blurred but unmistakable, looking directly into the camera as though she knew someone would watch it years later, her eyes sharp, her mouth caught in the beginning of a smile. My mother gasped, clutching at her chest, and my uncle closed his eyes as if the sight struck deeper than any blade. The footage cut to static, the sound filling the temple like a storm, and in that crackling noise I heard it, a voice faint, distorted, layered under the static like a ghost pressed into tape. "You were there." The same words in the note, the same words burned into my jacket, now carried on her voice, taunting, undeniable. I staggered back, the box at my feet rattling, as though something inside still wanted out, and when I looked at my uncle was watching me not with accusation, but with expectation, as if the next move had always been mine to make. And outside, past the heavy wooden doors, I heard it again, the measured rhythm of footsteps in the rain, approaching, deliberate, unhurried, as though Molly herself had decided the night was ready for her return. The footsteps outside drew closer, unbroken by hesitation, each one sinking into the night, like a drumbeat marking time. My mother clutched my arm, whispering prayers so quickly they tangled into one long thread of sound, her breath hot and desperate against my shoulder. The monk extinguished one of the candles. The flames snuffed into smoke, and in the sudden dimness the air fell heavier, as though the temple itself leaned forward to listen. My uncle stood motionless, his scar catching the faint glow of the remaining light, his hand resting on the brass key, as if it tethered him to the ground. Then came the sound of the temple doors straining against their hinges. A slow push, deliberate, with groaning like it remembered too many secrets. Rain spilled in first, a cold mist that swept across the stone floor, and then the silhouette appeared, slender, familiar, framed by the lantern outside. Molly stepped into the temple as if she belonged to it, her silk skirt damp, her hair braided the same way I remember from childhood, though her face carried years I had never witnessed. The lotus-patterned shoe was on her left foot, its match missing, her bare right foot slick with rain, toes leaving small dark prints on the stone. Her eyes scanned the room, resting on each of us in turn, on my mother, who had stopped breathing her prayers mid-syllable, on my uncle, whose jaw locked against whatever truth he was holding, and finally on me. A smile curved her lips, faint, practiced, almost kind, and yet in it was a sharp edge of control, the knowledge that she had orchestrated this moment long before any of us had arrived. "I wonder how long it would take," she said softly, her English smooth, touched with rhythm of Thai lullabies long gone from our household, her voice carrying the same eerie calm I'd once heard in the suspect's recordings. The temple seemed to shrink around us, the incense smoke curling tighter, the paused frame on the screen behind me still holding her frozen image, Molly staring into the lens from another night, another lie. "You shouldn't have come back," my mother whispered, her words cracking with grief and fury in equal measure. Molly tilted her head, her bare foot sliding across the stone, leaving another wet print, deliberate, like a signature. "I never left," she replied. The silence that followed was unbearable, heavy with every answer I needed and feared, and in that suspended moment the truth hovered between us, ready to break open and decide which one of us would carry its weight forever. The silence cracked first in my chest, a slow exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding, my breath clouding in the temple's cold air. Molly stood at the center, framed by the altar's faint glow, her bare foot marking the stone like a trail we could not erase. For a long moment, no one moved, my mother's hand still gripping my arm, my uncle still rooted to the brass key, the monk still a shadow against the wall, all of us suspended in the web she had spun. Then she lowered herself onto the floor, cross-legged in front of the shrine, as if nothing had changed, as if she were just a daughter coming home after too long away. Her eyes met mine, steady and unblinking, and the faint smile she wore softened, though it never lost its edge. "You wanted the truth," she said quietly, the words falling heavy into the incense-thick air. "Now you'll carry it with me." The monitor flickered once more, the static dissolving into a frozen image of her silhouette, leaving the shrine, the lotus shoe catching the lantern light, and it was as if the past itself had chosen to stop there, unwilling to reveal any more. I looked down at the jacket in my lap, the elephant patch torn but still clinging by a thread, and felt the circle of it all tighten one last time. Past and present, innocence and blame, family and betrayal. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper, soft against the roof, like the world had grown tired of listening. And in that stillness, in that fragile balance between what had been exposed and what would remain buried, I understood that some stories never end with answers. They end with a choice to keep walking, even when the ground is marked with someone else's footprints. I rose slowly, my mother's hand slipping from mine, and for the first time I didn't feel the weight of the jacket as evidence, but as armor, frayed and imperfect, yet mine to wear. Molly's gaze followed me as I turned toward the temple doors, the night waiting beyond them, the city lights blurred like watercolor through the rain. The truth was here, alive and unfinished. It would not let me go, but neither would I let it bury me. With the incense smoke curling behind us like the last thread of an old prayer, I stepped outside into the damp air, carrying the silence, the weight, and the beginning of something I could not yet name.